podcast. I'm Michelle and I have a guest today and I'm so excited because I haven't got to meet her in person and I see her on Instagram and I'm like, I know this woman and I love her content and let me get her on here. And so this is such a treat. Welcome, Shelly Robinson, to the Peace and Parenting podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I am so glad to be here and I'm so glad that we get to meet under these circumstances.
Me too. So good. So tell us, where can people find you? What are you all about? What do you teach? Tell us everything.
Yeah, I would love to. So I am the founder of Raising Yourself. I'm on Instagram and Facebook right now, working on getting on TikTok, not quite there yet. And I am hugely passionate about reparenting yourself. I'm a certified conscious parenting coach. And I got into reparenting yourself and that topic and inner child work about 10 years ago when my son was about 2. I was struggling with the yelling and the punishing and all of the kind of punitive approaches of parenting that just kind of came naturally. I put that in quotes. That was my default wiring, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good about it. And I couldn't quite get to like the root cause of what was going on there. And I just got really curious and interested in what was behind that.
Yeah.
And I kind of fell into this whole concept of reparenting yourself. And so I kind of took it from there.
Yeah, you and I have a similar story. I did the same thing, but I waited until my sweet daughter was 5.
Yeah.
I did a lot of the, yelling and shaming and time outing and all the things that, I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known a different way to go, but
yeah,
won't. And so we just do our best to keep moving forward. So where should we go with this road rage, mom rage, not road rage, mom rage? Where does it come from and how can we work on it?
Yeah. I don't think there's like a really neat and tidy answer to this, right? I mean, I would be so nice if we could just say, oh, it's this. And if you do that, then it's going to be so easy. But I'm going to share like a little bit of my personal story, share some common things I hear from people in my community. But I want to just preface that with like, it's not always like this black and white kind of conversation, right? And we know that on social media, like nuance goes to die. So I love having this opportunity to kind of like tease things apart, right?
Yes, I know people are like, but you didn't say this. I'm like, I know I can't say everything. I'm sorry. I can't say it all.
Yeah. I know it's so hard. So I think mom rage for so many of us it can come from a couple of different places. Underneath the rage and the rage of so many people, not just moms, but for kids and adults in general, is fear, right? We're afraid of something. There's something that we're bumping up against that is like a really big insecurity or, a terror that we're just like, absolutely not. I am not going to be vulnerable to acknowledging this fear. And I'm going to shield it with my rage. Right. Yeah. And these are not conscious, like things that we're doing. Right. It's just all kind of just like whooshes up. Right. And comes out. And I'll just share a quick story to kind of bring that to life as an example. So when my son was 4-ish, 5-ish, he and I were having this argument. I vividly remember, I don't know if you remember like any parenting moments where you just like, you'll never forget it. And it's not a good one. It's not a good one.
I remember all of those.
Yeah, I remember a lot of them, but this one, it was kind of like my turning point for like, whoa, you got to like rein this in, Shelly, because I don't want that to happen again. So we were arguing about either showering or brushing teeth. I'm not sure which, but some sort of hygiene thing that, of course, a 4-year-old little boy was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested, right? Like totally normal. But it just kept happening and he wasn't listening to me. And I just became enraged. Like it was, I don't know, the 7th or 8th time. And I did not feel heard. So I want you to like, remember those phrases. Was not listening to me, did not feel heard. And little Shelly just came roaring out at him, but except I was much scarier because I'm a grown up and I have much more power and like resources and authority over him. And I just screamed at him and it was horrible. And it wasn't one of those like yelling, like my voice kind of got louder and a little bit louder. It was just like, it was 0 to 60. And then I slammed his door. I had like a full-on adult tantrum. And I was like, oh my God, what was that? Like I felt immediate shame, right?
Yeah.
But it was like his not listening was like poking at this wound that I had about never feeling heard.
Yes.
And I was like, how dare you not hear me? That hurts little Shelly. And that's who was like, stepping forward in that moment. So I didn't understand all of that at the time. I just felt like a terrible person and a terrible mom. Yeah. But I remember vividly thinking, I do not want to do that again. Because of course, I don't know if you have seen Monsters Inc., but do you remember that there's a scene where like that Solly, I think, screams at the little boy and like his face, and that's like my little boy. It's like the face I'll never forget. He was just so scared of me in that moment, and I just really remember thinking, I cannot like lose control like that again.
I think this is so common too. I have that same trigger, right? Where I
Yeah.
need to feel heard because I was
Yes.
never felt heard as a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get louder and bigger and stronger and whatever. And I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
a big testament to if you listen to your kids when they're young, they won't, hopefully, well, they will sometimes, but
Yeah.
hopefully they won't have that need to feel heard so much when they're parenting.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how that gets wired in at such a young age. It's fascinating, and it can be used for better or for worse, right? We can wire in like, yeah, your voice matters. Yes, there's space for you to disagree here. Yes, we can hold two different viewpoints and have a conversation about it versus like, you're smaller than me. You have less power. You don't know any better. Shut your mouth. I don't care. Where
Yeah.
we have the option to wire those two things. And again, it's not that black and white, right?
No.
I mean, I'm still messing up and I'm still like, but I'm trying to make that the exception. Like the things where like my kids are like, I'm not on my best behavior as a parent. I'm trying to make that,
Yeah, and I think they noticed that. I know that my older daughter's 18 and I say, "What was the worst thing mommy did when you were young?" And she's like, "You didn't do anything." And I was like, "What? You don't remember me doing? You don't remember taking
right.
out? You don't remember yelling in your face just
Yeah.
like that? You don't
Yeah.
remember me yanking you out of the pool? You don't remember any of this
Yeah.
stuff?" And she's like, "No, I don't remember it." And it's like if you and I, but by the way, I have not been perfect since I started this. I've been
Yeah.
on a journey myself and yelled plenty of times and messed up plenty of stuff. But I think if you do most of it okay,
Yeah.
that's what they remember.
Right. Right. And honestly, I don't think kids want to grow up with a perfect parent. Like,
No.
I mean, that's damaging in and of itself. Like we're
Well, there
allowed to
is
be
no perfect
humans.
parent, but I think the idea is
No,
that if we don't want them to grow up with a parent who thinks they're perfect,
that's true. Yeah.
right? Because then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, nothing they did is wrong and it's all, super excusable as opposed to making amends with people.
Right. Right.
This trigger piece too, I have this trigger and I don't know if you do, but maybe some other people do. This idea of not being good enough or worthy, right? If
Yeah.
my child does something that's wrong,
Yeah.
then I'm like, no, it has to stop because that's a reflection of me as a mom. And it's
Yes.
like, I can't possibly have made this mistake because mistakes were so, thought poorly of in my own household. And so I
Yeah.
beat myself up. And then I would, go to beat my kid up because I needed them to do better in order to make me feel better because I felt like I was failing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I also have that trigger, and I definitely have had to work through my children's behavior not being a reflection of my worth.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, I know in those moments where I'm like, "Oh, how dare they? And what's wrong with me that I've cultivated this like type of behavior in them? My ego is like in the front seat. My ego is like, oh, like I can't believe your kid behaves like this. You are such a bad mom. When
Yeah.
really they're just probably doing something developmentally appropriate. They're
Mhm.
human. They're allowed to be like, dysregulated and overwhelmed and snarky. That happens sometimes, right?
And then, yeah, I get a lot of comments on like, well, you're creating entitled kids.
Yeah.
That's a common like traditional ideology. Like if you don't shut it down, right? If you don't make it go away,
Right.
you accept it, then
Mhm.
you have an entitled child and you have to make that stop in order to
Right.
kids that aren't entitled, that's a hard one too.
It is. And I think that statement comes a lot from parents or adults who aren't willing to first examine their own mistakes and their own behavior, right? Because when kids are like misbehaving or acting out, like our job as parents is to say, I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah.
Like we're going to make a generous assumption, right? And when we make mistakes, though, what we often struggle, there's a disconnect. Like if I mess up, I've
Mhm.
had to overwrite my inner critic that usually says, you idiot, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get this right? So before we like worry about how we respond to our kids' behavior, I'm not saying we should not worry about that, but we have to first start with how we respond to our own
Yeah.
little adult tantrums and our own like outbursts. And, if I'm being like snarky with my husband or if I'm using a rude tone with my kids, if I instantly shame myself, is that going to like make the situation? No, I'm going to be like, gee, Shelly, like, are you like stressed today or what's going on? Did you not sleep well? Like, what do you need? So I try to practice that with myself first so that when my kids misbehave, I'm like approaching it, it just spills over naturally.
And I think there's this other idea too, which you're kind of brushing up against too, is this like idea of respect is like I've realized just recently. I had a couple of respect posts, and they kind of had, there's this general idea that kids need to be respectful, and that if they say and do things that are not kind or are dysregulated, that somehow they're disrespectful. And I started thinking, I used to think that, and sometimes I still do. And I think what it is for me is that I get my, like you said, ego wounded.
Yeah.
I feel like they are embarrassing me or saying something that makes me look bad. And a lot of parents, if they really stop to think for just a few minutes, they might get there too. Like, it's not disrespect. They actually respect you. You felt disrespected because you allowed them to scratch at your ego.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know what? I feel like, yes, I have definitely brushed up against that. And I've gotten, as I've improved, where I still need improvement is when my kids like push back against someone who's not me, even if they're doing it respectfully, like parents or in-laws or teachers, and they say it like totally respectfully, but it's still kind of like not expected in society, right? For a kid to be like, why are you asking me to do that? I'm just like, can you give me a reason? And, or, even if they're not like, they're still mastering that skill, right? So sometimes it comes out a little bit like, not a big deal.
Not quite
my
right.
Ego is like, my ego is like, oh my God, they all think that I'm raising a brat, and
well, that's it. And like, society has really held us accountable for our child's, actions. And so we feel like if they misstep in society, that somehow it's our fault, or somehow they'll be judged and I'll be judged. And I just wish there was a more accepting general idea around children and their behavior.
Right. Like if my kids push back against me and they do it rudely, then we have a conversation about it. But like, I think that happens out in the wild and it's automatic. Like, what a bunch of crappy parents raising entitled brats. Like all these sweeping statements that just make people feel better about themselves by putting other people down.
Yeah. Or it's like, I think it's really hard to accept the fact. I think it's been really said in society, kids kind of need to be perfect, they behave. And it's really hard for people to say they can mess up.
Right.
The wrong thing. And that is actually okay and developmentally super appropriate. And even if it doesn't look the way you want it to look.
Yeah.
And I think, it's really hard. It's all very hard.
It is. And I know you talk a lot, Michelle, about punishment and how it's not really productive or useful. And I do too. Like that's something you and I know share a lot of like passion around. And something I always say, and that I have to constantly remind myself is like, kids don't have to suffer in order to learn. And I think that's like just this big weed we just seem to like rip out of society. And I always say like the only way to rip that weed out is to first like look at yourself and look back at your childhood and say, I didn't deserve to suffer in order to learn. Like, and that is I think people can sometimes get on board with the first one. And the second one, though, they're like, no,
I needed to.
I was wild.
Spanked. Yeah. I needed to be, it got me in line. And it's like, but you can get in line and learn things and be remorseful and get to amends and like be a moral person without it.
Yeah.
We don't need to. And I don't know necessarily if punishment actually teaches morality. I think that's another understanding. And that's a conventional idea. Like punishment teaches morality. Why do we think that?
Yeah. I think punishment just teaches kids how to not get caught next time.
Yeah. Or it teaches them to punish other people.
That's right. Yeah. It's all sorts of things like
it really is. And it might keep them from doing the thing because of fear, right? Or whatever.
Right.
But it's definitely not long-term helping them develop.
Right. And I think, something that helps to kind of keep me grounded when like punishment is tempting or, like it's like thinking about emotional regulation as a skill, just like riding a bike is a skill, right? No kid is born and is like knows how to do that. It's a skill that we're all developing for a lifetime. And so we wouldn't punish a kid for falling off their bike. And I know it's not entirely apples to apples, but it really is a
Yeah.
skill. And the only way you learn that really like and can internalize it and embody it is in connection and in relationship with people that
That's
are
right.
guiding you, right?
That are allowing you to fail, because I get this question. I get this idea also, like, well, the real world is going to punish them.
Yeah.
Great. Let the real world punish them, because
Right.
there's nothing we can do about that. And they understand that the moment they go to the playground
Yeah.
and
That's
someone
right.
takes the toy from them.
Yeah.
And so, do we want to have that be part of our most loving and endearing and wonderful relationship, punishment?
Right.
We want
Right.
the one place where you can screw up and I'm going to let you get to your own remorse.
Right.
That's your punishment.
Yeah.
Get to
Yeah.
your own remorse and see how you feel about it.
Right. And that kind of bumps up against this idea like about how we assume kids are wired. Like do we think kids are born rotten and bad? And like some people very much do.
I
Absolutely.
know. I know.
And so you have to
How
keep
can you
chipping
believe a
away.
baby is born rotten? They're so sweet. They don't have
No.
any inkling to be mean to you.
Right.
But my
Right.
dad even said, when I first had my daughter, he was like, "Well, don't pick her up. You're going to spoil her because she's just trying to manipulate you." And I was like, "What? Are you insane? She's 2 weeks old. Like,
Right.
are you crazy?"
Right.
That is a very real idea that exists in our
Yeah.
world.
Right.
And so unraveling it and saying, "No, guys, this 100 years of thinking is wrong,"
Yeah.
becomes very hard for folks.
Yeah.
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 Wait, let's get back to the yelling. What do you do? What have you done? What are some things that you've done to try to help yourself move away from, your own dysregulation?
Yeah. So I, over the years, have really just honed in on a few phrases that they're on repeat now. And I just want to say that they were not on repeat at the beginning. So I'm going to share this. But if you hear this and you go try this today, please be patient with yourself, because just because you now have these in your back pocket doesn't mean they like magically work. But it takes a lot of practice. So one of them is, and I know this is not unique to me, but like this is not an emergency. So when my kid is, ruffling my feathers and my little ego's getting its feelings hurt, I can now notice the physical sensations in my body. That's step one. I'm like noticing that I'm getting hot and my heart's starting to pick up a little bit. And those are cues that I'm going to freak out if I don't like rein this in. So I say, this is not an emergency. And I literally pretend that I'm like in quicksand. So I can just like slow down, right? Just like mommy is getting a little bit irritated and this is not an emergency and I need a break, and it's like almost theatrical. It's like almost ridiculous, but I do it more for myself and my kids. It's almost like they know, they're like, okay, mommy's about to, but, but I don't. And they know that's kind of like my cue to slow down and their cue to like pause. So that's one thing. Another thing I silently say to myself is they're a good kid and I'm a good mom. It's just kind of like constantly like just cultivating that generous assumption about them and me. Like we're both having a hard time and we're both good. And that's okay. And then the third thing is like, we can solve this together, right? So we don't have to do this. We don't have to be like this. Like we can figure this out together. So whatever it is, like an example from my life recently is like getting into these silly arguments with my daughter about what to eat for breakfast in the morning. Like really silly, right? But just, it's so annoying. It was becoming really annoying to me.
Yeah.
And I started to feel like I could feel that like enemy mindset creeping in. Like, why is she doing this to me? Why can't you just eat some toast? And then I was like, you know what? I feel like we can figure this out together. Like, I wonder if we can like figure this out. And so what we ended up doing, and I'm not saying this would work for everyone in every family, but what worked for us was we both brainstorm all the breakfast options that we have, like typically in our house, right? Like cereal and toast and eggs and like the things, like 5 things that we rotate. We put them on a menu and she's very artistic. So she made this beautiful menu and put it on that, like she painted it and it was so pretty and she put it on our fridge. And now in the mornings we like we pretend we're like in a restaurant and she's like, I think I'll make this. And she helps me. Like she's 8, so she's not like
so cute.
So it worked out because I went away, like I moved away from the enemy and more like the collaborative. So those are like 3 things I
love that.
to.
Your first one, I teach that all the time to people because I feel like when we slow ourselves, and I love it's not an emergency. Did it come from Dr. Laura Markham?
I do not know. I mean, I remember I don't know. I feel like I've probably read that
A
on
million
in
times. I've
dozens
heard
of
it from her
places,
a
but
million
I
times,
adore
so I
her,
always
so
attribute it to Dr.
yeah.
Laura Markham. That's
Yes.
where I heard it.
Okay.
I don't know if that's right or not, but I remember her voice and just the way she talks to people. And
Yeah.
this is not an emergency and it's okay. And I
Oh,
was like, oh, if I could just embody her
I
like whole demeanor.
know. I
But you're
adore
right. And
her.
I would always say, like, I'm walking slow, I'm moving slow. I'm
Uh-huh.
talking slow. Mine was always the sibling rivalry, right? I could hear it
Oh,
happening.
yes.
And
Yes.
I would traditionally run in like, what's going on? What are you doing? And then
Yes.
I was just like, I'm going to walk as slow as I can to that sibling
Uh-huh.
rivalry. I don't care if it escalates. I need to slow my body down.
Yes. Yeah.
It really, really helps, actually. I can't believe how much just that one thing helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if we can get our bodies slowed down, then everything else kind of follows
Yep. And
suit.
that 4-4-4 breathing really helped. I would try to breathe
Yeah.
that 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold empty 4 while I was
Yeah.
walking. That totally helped me too. But I
Yeah.
needed that stuff. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have been able to change, I don't think.
Right. Oh, another one, Michelle, is
Yeah.
that it's probably my favorite one that I just say to myself is I want to feel good on the other side of this.
Ooh, I like that
That's
one.
probably my favorite. And I remember thinking that in the moment when I was super mad, I like getting annoyed with one of my kids. And I could like flash forward to feeling regret and shame and being like, why did I do that? And I was like, no, I'm gonna feel like I was like determined, I was like, I'm gonna feel good about this. And I'm gonna make a conscious decision right now that I'm gonna like look back on this moment and be like,
I
good
did
job.
it.
You did it. You
You
did
did.
it.
One
Yeah.
other thing too, I just thought of too, is that I always like to think is like, I want the upset to remain with them and not become about
Mm, yeah.
the
Yeah.
tantrum can stay with the child. Do
Yes.
not need to have my other tantrum in the middle of their tantrum. So
Hey.
if I think I thought of that because of what you said. Like if I could do that, then at the end I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
they were mad, but I wasn't.
Right.
And I
Right.
left it with them. Now they get to do with what they want with it. They get to
Yeah.
learn from it. They get to mull it over. They get to decide if they want to make amends. It's theirs. I didn't
Yes.
the whole experience and make it about my ego.
I love that. I know. It's like when you say that, like the image that pops into my mind is like passing this hot potato of pain or anger back and forth. It's like, no, you take it. No, you take it. And like as parents, we have to be able to be like, I'm gonna help you actually extinguish the fire in that potato. Now we're getting really sideways with this analogy, but it's just like meeting their fire with fire. Like it doesn't help.
Yeah. Oh, Shelly, this was so good. I'm so glad we got to connect.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a lot of similarities.
I know. I adore your work. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Me
Thank you
too.
for
Every
your
time I
voice.
see your post, I'm like, yes, yes,
Yeah,
good.
same. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Well, where tell us again where we can find you.
Yeah, I am on Instagram under Raising Yourself and Facebook, and my website's shellyrobinson.com.
Amazing. Go check her out. If you don't, then you are missing out on a big piece of Instagram that you might like. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so